Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So today we're continuing the series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, and I'm doing something a little bit different today because I want to talk about my favorite arcade shmups on MiSTer that you can play today. Now, fair warning, it's going to be very cave heavy, but we're going to have some other makers of shmups in there. I just love a cave bullet hell shmup, so you're going to be seeing a lot of that. But there's so many awesome options for shmups on the MiSTer. You're going to have an absolute metric ton of fun playing each and every one of those. And just so you guys know, today's video is brought to you by MiSTer Add-ons. I've been using his equipment since the beginning of this channel. Always has great stuff. I'll leave a link in the description below if you need to pick up some new MiSTer gear. He's sponsoring my MiSTer videos moving forward. I couldn't be happier about that. But right off the top with Guwange here, this is one of my favorite bullet hell shmups of all time, and honestly picking a favorite cave bullet hell shmup can be a very difficult thing. They make some absolute bangers as far as the genre is concerned, but I've always loved the theming of Guwange better than any of their other shmups. I also love that you're technically not even flying around in the game, at least at start. You were running around on the ground. Obviously it still has the same shmup mechanics that you know and love. It's got all those bullet hell patterns that only Cave can do this well. But honestly, running around on the ground makes me feel like this is a Pocky and Rocky game made by Cave, and as opposed to being a run and gun game, it is a bullet hell shmup. And if you've never played a bullet hell shmup before, take my word for it, it can seem insurmountable at first. All of these projectiles flying around screen that you need to learn to navigate around, if you've never played one, you could look at this and say there's no way I could ever do that. But trust me, once you start practicing, once you learn your character's hitbox, and once you kind of get memorized down some of these patterns, what seemed impossible becomes very possible right in front of your own eyes. It just takes a little bit of practice, but it's such a fun learning curve, and it's such a good risk versus reward situation. You start to get better at the game, and it just makes you want to come back and play more and more. And honestly, the setting, the graphics, the music, everything in Guwange, 10 out of 10, one of my favorite games of all time in the shmup category, and it works absolutely spectacularly here on MiSTer FPGA. And trust me, you want to play it this way versus buying an original board. I do have a couple original Cave games in my collection, and if I was to sell one now, we're talking about a mortgage payment on a very expensive house. That's what you'd have to pay me to get a board off of me. But sticking with Cave and moving to the horizontal aspect ratio, we're going to take a look at Progear. This is on the Capcom CPS2 cores from Hotego. Now this is basically Cave making a bullet hell shmup, but doing it for Capcom and doing it in a horizontal orientation, which you don't see that much from them outside of Death Smiles, and that's not on MiSTer, so I can't really talk about that here today. But this is another amazing game, basically a steampunk version of a bullet hell shmup, but moving horizontally. It's got incredible music, it's got incredible graphics, great gameplay, everything you want in a shmup, but I would say the Progear is slightly easier than Cave's output for their own boards. This is not an easy game by any stretch of the imagination, but it's also not a game that's going to 100% just mop the floor with you and laugh at you when it does it. This is one of the quintessential Capcom CPS2 games, and it is one of the, in my opinion, best shmups made of all time, and it is just that good. I love the steampunk aesthetic, I love everything this game does visually, mechanically, and of course on MiSTer, there's absolutely no input latency whatsoever that I can feel. I can play this game as well as I've ever been able to play any bullet hell shmup on real hardware, so much so that I recently sold my Capcom CPS2 multi to another collector because I hadn't plugged it in for over a year because of MiSTer. It is just that good, and this game is that much fun. Definitely check it out if you never have before. It's one of those Capcom CPS2 experiences that you should have at least once. You will see I take my first death there. The game can be difficult. I'm not going to lie to you and say it's easy. It's just easier than most of Cave's other output, so it's a really good place to start outside of the fact that it is horizontal versus vertical, and some people just don't love that. But speaking of vertical or tate shmups made by Cave, we have Espradi, which is again one of my other favorite Cave games ever made, and it has an absolutely spectacular soundtrack. I keep saying how good the Cave music is, so I'm going to let you listen, but come back as I got more shmups to show ya. Cave made awesome music for their games, but unfortunately with the bullet sound effects, sometimes you actually can't hear the music as well as you wish you could, but that just kind of comes with the territory in this genre. And I know this video has been cave heavy so far, so the next game is going to be made by a different developer, but if you're looking for this type of game on MiSTer, there are so many amazing cores, and if you have the arcade organizer on, just go to the cave folder and see what is in there. Sure, there's going to be a couple games that are beat 'em ups around their hardware, but for the most part, you're going to hit a shmup that's probably considered one of the best of all time. Just be prepared to die a lot when you start until you learn, and then you start to have fun directly after that. Now, Takumi made Mars Matrix. This is a pre-rendered game that uses kind of those digitized sprites that look like they came from polygons, and this is another amazing game that runs on MiSTer today. It's definitely a completely different vibe than anything Cave did, and that's why I wanted to include it on this list, not just because I love it, but because it feels completely different. Not just because it was made by a different company and it has different vibes, it also is set in space, and obviously space is a big genre for shmups, but so far what we've been looking at really doesn't have that deep space vibe going on. Now, I'm not going to say Mars Matrix is the prettiest game ever made. These pre-rendered assets definitely age a little bit worse than sprites and 2D background layers, but they still have a really nice charm to them. Just think Donkey Kong Country, except set in space in a shmup, not in a platformer made by Rare and Nintendo. But again, this is another absolute classic of the genre, and this is one that isn't as difficult off the top as some of the Cave stuff. I'm not saying again that these are going to be easy, but they are going to be a little bit more inviting. And you have this nice capture mechanic as well, where you can bring those bullets in, charge them up, and send them back at your enemy. So mechanically, this does stuff that a lot of the Cave shmups don't do. And that's one of the things when you're dealing with this genre. You find developers you like that have mechanics in their games that you gravitate towards. If you don't love something that Cave does, maybe you like something that Takumi does. If you don't like that, maybe there's a Raizing game that you're going to absolutely fall in love with. What I love so much about Mars Matrix is just some of the patterns. They're both organic as well as pattern-based at the same time. There's so much to navigate around, so much to learn, and if you screw up, so much to get completely shot by like I did right there. But as you get better at these games, they just open up so much for you. You get to learn what's happening, you get to figure out how to navigate where your hit spot is, and just basically become so much better over time. It's probably the one genre in which progression is just a huge thing. Now moving on to even another game from another manufacturer, this is Tatsujin Oh, also known as Truxton II. I have this on the FM Towns Marty. It's one of the best versions out there, but obviously the arcade original always is going to be the best. Now this game really isn't a bullet hell shmup, but I will tell you right now it's a punishingly difficult game. Death in Tatsujin Oh comes with big consequences, not just respawning where you are. You need to get very good at this game very quickly, but I love the almost Giger-esque organic nature to these spaceships. It looks like it's half machine, half organic. This game's visuals are just spectacular. Sure, it's not going to be as impressive as something like Cave, but this was made much earlier. But it's another shmup on MiSTer that you can play today that seems to be absolutely perfect. Outside of that, you just have the FM Towns Marty version, and trust me, you don't want to spend the money on that. It's not cheap, and it's not as good as the arcade board. Now moving back to Capcom for a bit, we have 19XX. This is part of the 1945 series, and this is your classic World War II style vertical shmup. This is definitely a subgenre in and of itself, the war game. Sure, a lot of the Cave, games, everything here and there has the same concept, you're battling an enemy, but World War II and war in general was definitely a subgenre of the shmup category, and it's one that I really enjoy because we get this nice colorful South Pacific look. It has all of the complex shmup mechanics you want, but it's a little bit brighter and a little bit cheerier even if it is based on an actual war. But it's got some incredible music as well. Go ahead and listen for 30 seconds, but come back because I still have a ton of shmups to show you that I absolutely love. It's got some really good music, and honestly, Capcom games usually have amazing music, so it's not really that surprising. But again, this is just another type of game you can play, and that's what I want the main takeaway of this video to be. If you don't think you're into shmups, but you're into a certain company shmup, so you haven't tried other ones, there is something for everybody to love in this genre. And based on views, I usually see that shmups aren't the most popular genre. It's definitely a niche, but I'm always trying to get more people involved in them. Because if you don't like something like 19XX here with the military shooter theme, you can move over to Sega and and Success on the 16B core, and you can play Cotton. This is your classic horizontal cute-em-up, kind of feels like Death Smiles before Death Smiles actually became a thing, and this is definitely going to be a lot easier of a game, at least to start. I know some people don't love bullet hell shmups, but something like Cotton is completely different. It's fun, it's charming, it's colorful, it's got a great theme to it, and it is a challenging shmup as well. It's definitely going to test you in later levels, and it just gives you a completely different genre to play in as far as the sort of vibes are concerned. This is cute, it's colorful, it's got this horror theme to it. It's everything that all of the games I've shown you up until this point 100% are not, and it works 100% perfectly on MiSTer Hotego, and his team did a great job with these cores, so definitely check Cotton out. I think you're going to have a lot of fun, and if you've played it before, leave me a comment down below, and honestly just tell me what your favorite shmup of all time is. I would be curious. Now moving on to Guwange, this is going to be another tonal change. This one definitely has a lot more personality than some of the other games as far as like the colorful, really amped up nature of things. It's got a lot of story to tell, and it definitely has this kind of like World War II meets a sci-fi future feel to it. It is a vertical or tate shmup, even though it's played in the horizontal field of view, and I know usually when I say that I get comments saying that's incorrect, and honestly doesn't really matter. This is moving vertically. No, it doesn't really have the tate orientation. This is a 4:3 aspect ratio turned on its side like it normally would be on a television, but I still consider these vertical or tate shmups, but it seems to really get people all wound up. But honestly, outside of that little tangent, it's another classic shmup that you can 100% play on MiSTer today. The core works spectacularly well, it's fun, it's vibrant, it's challenging, and it is very stylistic as well. I love this sort of futuristic cityscape that we get to fly around in, attacking what look like World War II planes with a futuristic flair. And again, amazing soundtrack. Go ahead and listen for 25 seconds and I'll be right back. Honestly, one of my favorite things about Guwange has got to be the soundtrack. It just does everything for me that I need. And if I think about this game critically, there's nothing really I would improve about it. It's got awesome music, it's got great gameplay, the colors and graphics just pop off the screen, and it is fun to play a vertical shmup that uses the horizontal screen space as well, because some of the tate games can look quite small if you rotate your screen via the MiSTer on-screen display menu. So this just kind of fills more of the screen and just gives you more to look at. Not that there's anything wrong with a traditional tate game, but Guwange here has everything I need. Great patterns, great graphics, great music, just a straight up ton of fun. Now I know I said that it was going to be a little cave heavy, and of course we're going to move back to DoDonPachi here. This is one of their most well known games. Everyone who plays cave games definitely has their own favorite, but if you've looked up best cave games of all time, DoDonPachi is definitely going to show up near the top of pretty much every single list, and that's for a very good reason. This game again is sheer bullet hell shmup perfection. There's nothing you can improve about it, there's nothing it needs to do differently. The only thing you need to do is get good quickly, because it is another brutally difficult game. But that's what I love so much about Caves games. They hand you your ass and you need to figure out how to make it work for you. And I love that sense of progression and learning in any sort of shmup. Pretty much every single level will happen the exact same way, the exact same time when you hit start. So it's up to you to learn all of the different patterns, all of the different things going on, and once you actually get that muscle memory, kind of like a music rhythm game, you're going to realize that you are basically untouchable until you forget what you were supposed to be doing. But moving over to another game that's not cave, because I gotta keep putting non-cave games in here, this is Varth. It's another military shooter, and definitely has a completely different look than every other game that I've shown you on this list so far. But that doesn't mean it isn't good. It is fun. It just feels more like a classic shmup from the early 90s and a lot of what the cave games were doing, or the Raizing or Tatsujin games were on the CPS2. This is definitely a different feeling type of game, but maybe this is what you grew up on. So tell me down below what the first shmup you played in arcades was. I would be really curious. I actually got into this genre because my father loved playing them on our NES when I was a kid. It's just one of those things. That's where I first learned that shmups existed in the first place. I think it was Tiger Heli that he played, but I can't remember now. But he fell in love with the game. I was not any good at it whatsoever because I was just a kid, but I remember him playing it, and I started playing shmups early on in my gaming career, and they just stuck with me. This is what I kind of remember them looking like when I was a kid, outside of obviously the NES being definitely inferior to this. But you could do a lot worse than Varth. It is a fun game. It's got its own unique flair and vibes. I love this kind of cool blue that comes in on the cityscape here. It just has something new and different to show you every level, and it is a fun time. And it does go to show that there's definitely deeper cuts on the MiSTer FPGA when it comes to shmups, because Varth is definitely not an unknown game, but it's not a game I hear mentioned near as much as every other shmup that appears on MiSTer FPGA or even an arcade lists. So definitely if you got some spare time and you want to try something new and you've never tried Varth, I can't recommend you try it enough. It's a fun game and I think you're absolutely going to love it. Now moving over to a different game with another completely different vibe, this is Dimahoo. It has so much personality from the attract sequence all the way through to the game. This has such a unique graphical sense and art style. I've never seen anything like it before, and I don't think I'm ever going to see anything like it since, because it's basically machine meets terrapin, turtle, monster, who knows what the hell it is. It's like a kaiju action battle game with a shmup format. Basically seems like half of the tanks are mounted to turtles. As we get into the game proper here, you're going to see that we have floating islands and a sort of pseudo fantasy setting. Kind of looks like peasantry England down there below with a thatched roof, but then we also have military tanks as well. So I'm really not sure what era this is set in. I have no idea what's going on, but I do know that's a turtle tank running around, and I'm 100% there for it. This game also has another banger of a soundtrack, so go ahead and listen for 30 seconds. I'll be back and talk a little more about the game.
Worry, be careful. And level up. Shock, level up.
And yes, that was a dragon mounted to what I think was a B-52, and you shoot his tail off, but it's half dragon, half military plane, 100% a vibe, and 1000% completely unexplainable. But that's what I love about Dimahoo. It is so weird, it is so unique, and there's a really good competent tate shmup attached to it, so you 100% can't go wrong. But that is my list of my favorite shmups on MiSTer FPGA on the arcade core side. I am sure I forgot your favorite. This is just my personal list. If a game didn't show up here, don't think I don't like it. It just means that it's not one of the things that hits me the way I need to be hit. But honestly, leave me a comment down below and tell me what your favorite shmup on MiSTer is. I would be curious, and maybe you can convince me to play the one that you think I should. Short of that, if you like these more genre videos, tell me down below. It's a little bit different than what I'm used to doing, and I may do some more in the future, so if you have any ideas for videos talking about different genres, tell me down below because I would be curious. Short of that, go play some shmups, have a good time. I love the arcades, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.